Good morning. Today is the 11th day of Nisan, the 19th of April. The 11th day of Nisan is usually designated as the Nasi Livnei Asher, the king of the tribe of Asher, because the 11th day is the birthday of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and now it's 122 years since his birth. He was born in 1902. What we want to do today is we want to wrap up our discussion of the different forms of defilement. Yesterday we linked all of them to the three different categories of divine meditation that a person can do. And just to recap, we said there is divine meditation, looking for the divine in nature or looking for the divine in the immanent. There is Mazal Tov Erika. And there's looking for the divine that is transcendent, beyond everything. We talked about this as being the nothingness that's behind all of reality. It's not immanent in reality, it's behind it, as it were. And then we said that that the Torah novelizes a new form of divine meditation called meditation on God's will. And that is a higher form of meditation or contemplation of the divine, and obviously it has to pass through the Torah. It has to be directly through the Torah. Now, looking for the divine behind everything, let me just give an example that can sort of give us an idea of what does it mean to look for the divine behind everything, the nothingness behind everything. So one of the things that we do a lot of, because of Rabbi Ginsburg, is gematria. And what does gematria do? Why is there a contention about this? Because some people will come and say, but you can show that everything equals everything. But that's exactly the point. There has to be a realm in which there is something that is beyond everything else, and it shows you that everything is really one. So, unfortunately, you really can't show that everything equals everything, because that would be a complete tautology. But you do get a sense, much more than usual, that things that you didn't think are related to one another are actually related. Let me just give you one that is not connected at all to Torah. It does in some way have something to do with Torah. But everybody knows about the elephant in the china shop, right? So if you say this in Hebrew, Pil bechanut charsina. That's how you say it in Hebrew. It's equal to sensitivity, rigishut, which is a beautiful thing, which is exactly what you're trying to say. If I feel like an elephant in a china shop, what is my remedy? My remedy is to be very sensitive and to make sure that I don't knock over any of the china and break things. Of course, we don't just mean that the person's in a china shop. It's a metaphor for a person who feels that they're clumsy, that they don't respect other people's feelings, let's say, or so on. So sensitivity, and like in the case of Mashiach and Nachash, like the Messiah and the serpent, that the fact that they have the same gematria, 358, means that the Mashiach is the remedy for the Nachash. And we actually talked about this 2 weeks ago in Parashat Shmini, when we said that the central major letter of the Pentateuch, of the Torah, is the large Vav of the word Gachon, on his belly. And we said that is the essence of the Torah of Moses, is to rectify the serpent who's walking on his belly, the snake who's walking on his belly. What does the snake who's walking on his belly represent? He represents a feeling of pride, of self-aggrandizement. That's what the snake sold Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. You should be like God, knowing good and evil. And that's the major issue that the Torah comes to solve, this concept of pride. Okay, so that's just an example of what it means that we need to look for the nothingness behind things. We don't normally look at things the way that they would in the East, like sitting in front of a wall and trying to imagine that there's nothing here. That that in the end is losing touch with reality. That's not the point. Another method that we use a lot is word transformations. Word transformations are a beautiful way of saying that something equals something else. Why? Because here it's much more than just gematria. You're not just saying the value of these words is equal to the value of those words. We're saying we're going to take the phrase itself and we're going to permute the letters, and the permutation of those letters is going to lead us to a different phrase or a different word. So you can be very creative with this, and actually a couple of years ago, when we just started this, I don't know if it was a couple of years ago, but it was a while ago, when we just started about the series, we talked about what shashuim atzmi means, or self recreation, like recreation within oneself. And I mentioned that shashuim atzmi is the level of godliness that in which God plays with the letters, and He can shift one thing into another. So, for instance, in the Tanya, he talks about the fact that the account of creation does not contain words for everything in reality, only for very few distinct objects. So where did everything else come from, he asks? And he says they all come from permutations and permutations of permutations of the letters that you find within the account of creation. From that you can get to every object in the world. Okay, I mean, he's not giving us a what we call an exhaustive proof. He's giving us the method. He's saying that really behind everything is this ability, this nothingness that can transform everything into everything. Really, in that way, everything is related. A lot of times we talk about the cyclicality of wealth. We say that there's a person who at some point is very wealthy, seems to be very wealthy, and then sages say, but wealth is like a circle. It's like a Ferris wheel, that you may be up here, but your descendants that descend from you may actually be poor. So make sure that you keep this wheel well greased, well oiled, meaning make sure that you give to the poor all the time. We talked about the impoverished earlier this week. So just one small example of a word permutation that is very surprising and is very, how should I say, it's really engaging. You have to really think about it. So one time we were sitting and Rav Ginsburg sort of came up with something in like a second. He said, Yesh me'ain, meaning something or being from nothingness, Yesh me'ain equals Esh mi'ain. Means is the same thing as fire from wine. It's the same letters. And you play with this, and if you have enough Torah with you, you can also explain what this actually might mean. What this is. But the point is not so much what it means, as much as that it confounds you, and it gives you a sense that what you see can be many, many variations. It's not just what you see. So all this is true about what we talked about yesterday as an example, but you can, of course, say nonsense. And you can use gematria, you can use all these techniques to show that things that are not other things are them. And you can explain them in terrible ways. And, by the way, there's a lot of Christian gematria, which is awful. I mean, a Torah scholar looks at it and says, you have to start with a very straight mind. In fact, there's this... There's a very interesting gematria, maybe the most interesting, the gematria of all gematrias, which says that ki lo davar reku mikem. This is not something that is empty from you. A phrase that Moses speaks in Deuteronomy. This, what I've given you, is not empty from you, meaning that it doesn't have meaning. That equals gematriot. It equals the value of doing gematria. So if it's empty because of you, because you came empty to it, because you don't know how to interpret it. So all that has to do with a blemish that can cause the non-seminal discharge and the Metzora, and those are the aspects that have to do with the light of Father, the wisdom. But today, in today's reading, we read about the menstrual cycle. And here we have something that is natural. Nobody would say that being a Metzora, having non-seminal discharge, is a natural occurrence. It's a disease. That's how it's defined. But to have a menstrual cycle is not a disease. It's nature. It's the way it is. So that's why we view these as being caused. This state of nature is caused by this other type, this first type of meditation, which is looking at the immanent, trying to instill God, to see God within everything. And in that, everybody is engaged because we all live in the same world. We all experience a physical world, a lower world, and we don't see godliness. And not only do we not see godliness, most of the time we actually see like a mirror reflecting ourselves, and we see ourselves as the root of everything. And so this contemplation is the one that, on the one hand, is most needed. It's natural, meaning you can't live in the world and only see a physical world. You have to be able to live in the world and see godliness in it. And the way we usually call this, the way we usually interpret this, is what we call divine providence, hashgacha pratit. If you don't see that your life is being conducted, orchestrated, and for the good, then you are blemishing this type of reflection, this type of contemplation. And it's such a natural thing that we say that this is what creates the menstrual cycle. It's just a natural thing in all the females in the world. And the reason is because the feminine is always close to nature. So this is like a blemish that's affecting everything that's close to nature. I don't have to remind you about this whole concept of Mother Nature and so on, that nature is considered to be feminine. Nature is always associated with bina, with understanding, because its nature is to have laws, to have rules. But the question is, what rules are you seeing? So a scientist is looking for rules that mask God. They're looking for rules that don't reveal God. And in fact, they might reveal God in some way. If a person believes that every single law of nature that's been found is really a manifestation, a imminent manifestation of godliness, that's fine. That's a good thing. That's the way it should be. But most people don't. They think that finding a rule of nature is a way to extricate God out of the picture, as is famous from, I believe it was, I don't remember who it was, French philosopher, I'm losing the name right now, in the 17th century, who, when asked about his work by Napoleon, said, and Napoleon asked him, "And where is God in all your work?" He said, "I didn't need that hypothesis." Meaning, I was able to extricate that out of the whole story. Now, it's actually the most delicate and the most difficult type of meditation and contemplation of godliness that we have is this type of contemplation. The contemplation that has to do with nature, with looking at our world, looking at how God is immanent. And there was a story that didn't get into wonders because there was no room. And I want to read it to you because it stresses how important it is that a person who is engaged in at any level with looking at nature has to have an additional measure of lowliness, an additional measure of not coming to pride. So the story is like this. During the period of the struggle against the Enlightenment in Russia, which attempted to obligate Jewish children to engage in secular studies, the government demanded of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Chabad, that at least one of his grandchildren would learn in a public school. None of his grandchildren agreed. The Tzemach Tzedek called his grandson Mordechai and asked him to attend the public school. In exchange, he promised him that when he would return from school every day, the two of them would study Tanya together. And so it was, the grandson went to public school, and every day he would study Tanya with his grandfather, the Tzemach Tzedek. When they reached chapter 50 in the Tanya, they reached the words, there are words, this is how they translate. There is one individual who is excited by, etc., and there is another individual who is excited by, etc. What the Rebbe there is saying is different people are affected by different ideas. Different things affect different people. They cause them excitement, intellectual excitement, emotional excitement. Not everybody is the same. The Tzemach Tzedek explained to his grandson that what is being said here is, though the excitement discussed is from matters of divinity, still even that can turn into a feeling of self, a feeling of being something. What is he doing? He's saying there is a person. There is, in Hebrew, is yesh. You become a yesh, but what you're excited. Meaning, even if you're doing the meditation about divinity that is transcendent, because you are engaged, you Mordechai, because you go to public school, you have to be careful, even with matters of divinity, that even they can bring you to a feeling of self, that even they can bring you to a feeling of there is, of I exist, I'm a yesh. That is how difficult it is to live in the world and to engage in the physical structures, because you're always prone to hiding God, to masking God, and especially it causes, especially scientists, a feeling of kochi ve'otzim, my power and my strength is what created all this, and not an ability to see godliness. So this is natural. There's no way around this. You can't live in the world and not contemplate God, but we have to know that this has a consequence, and the consequence is the menstrual cycle. That's how it's seen. So this is actually a natural type of impurity, and it can only be at the end of days rectified by who we call the Mashiach, the son of Ephraim, or the Mashiach, the son of Joseph. Not the Mashiach, son of David. Mashiach, son of David is for the higher level, which is what we talked about yesterday, half of the Metzora and the Zav, and the higher type of blemishes, which are even more uncommon, which have to do with Tumat Sheretz. We didn't talk about this here. This was in Shmini, of a person who touches eight types of vermin, that they have this type of defilement, and death, because those represent a blemish in God's will, meaning that the person who is dead, or the person who is connected to the vermin, he is outside of the realm, or he puts himself outside of the realm of God's will, because God's will is not that there should be death. Clearly, this is all related to Adam, who listened to the snake and maybe did even more with the snake, who's one of these types of vermin, and so on. But that for another time. But the Mashiach, son of Joseph, he is meant, like the rectification that we always connect him with, the rectification of Torah and science, of being able to see within science only godliness, and not just the natural laws, but being able to take the natural laws, what's behind them, and to discover godliness. That is a rectification. And when that happens, then there will be no more menstrual cycle anymore. There won't be needed, because that blemish will have been rectified. So, to say it in maybe more regular language, that the breakthrough, the scientific breakthrough that's needed in order to end the suffering of women all over the world, is connected to unifying Torah and science. So with this, we'll end today. It's been a little longer, and hope to see you next week on Sunday. Monday is going to be tough, but I'll try also. And God willing, we should be, for the rest of the week, we'll probably only meet on Thursday and Friday next week, although I may do Wednesday also, even though it's a holiday in America, or outside the land of Israel. We'll see how we'll play it by ear, and we'll send out messages in the WhatsApp group to let you know. But I think we can do Sunday for sure, hopefully, and Thursday and Friday for sure, and maybe even Monday and Wednesday. Thank you very much, and in the meantime, happy preparations for Pesach, and everything should be with joy and without too much pressure. All the best, and good Shabbos.